I can't hate this movie. This is Coppola at his most unbound. Take it or leave it. Is it great? No. Is it the worst thing you've ever seen? No. I've seen Neil Breen movies. I would take Megalopolis over every Neil Breen movie ever. Welcome to the Cinema Psycho Show, the madhouse for film freaks and film fans of all types. I'm your host, Brian Coddington, joined my fellow co-host and filmmaker, John Woolscroft.
More like Megaslopolis. Get out of here.
Oh boy. So this is going to be a very fun episode. I'm already going to tell you all this right now. So John and I, we actually plan out our episodes. John, we usually do what, like a year in advance? Well, not a year in advance, but we like know what our episodes are going to be for the whole year.
And it's, in theory, yes, but it's kind of like cards subject to change. Like so many moving parts will adjust and rearrange and completely change that schedule. But yeah, we at least have a skeleton come January of like, here are all the episodes, but some will be topic ? You know, but yeah, we'll have an idea.
Yeah. We usually we try to have an idea, and we actually had our October and late September kind of mapped out for the most part. But sure enough, John and I had the pleasure of being invited to an advanced screening of the new Francis Ford Coppola film. I'm going to call that film because it's a film. Fable. A fable. Megalopolis, a fable. A movie that, let's be honest here, is over 40 years in the making. And I'm not joking when I say that.
And it's not a surprise.
It's not a surprise. We got the chance to see it. We were going to do kind of a mini episode, but honestly, like I told John on the ride back, I'm like, this has to be a full episode. This has to be a one we do. And, Megalopolis, at the time this episode's coming out, I think it's literally probably premiering in every other theater. So, like, are we going to go into spoiler territory? Probably.
But I don't even think
but maybe not. I don't know.
I don't even think that's going to ruin anything for anybody in this movie, because half the time I was like, what the fuck is going on? And then there was another, like, quarter of the time that things were just said and dropped. And yeah, I think that this really shows, as we said, 40 years in the making, because Brian, you and I have always discussed and kind of debated, is filmmaking a young man's game? And I guarantee you, if Coppola had been able to make this right after Apocalypse Now, it would have been a completely different movie. If he made it in 85, it would have been a completely different movie from that, or what we got. If he did it in the 90s, 2000, 2010, like, he's a different person in all of these times. So I don't know how different each version of Coppola this movie would have been. But I think because you have 4 different decades worth of Francis Ford Coppola, this movie ends up a beautiful mess.
Yeah, that's what I've seen, is a lot of people describe it as a beautiful mess. And I mean, there are some really, really beautiful set pieces, beautiful costumes, beautiful camera work in this. But there's also some stuff that I'm just like, is this still the same Francis Ford Coppola who did The Godfather? And is this still the same Francis Ford Coppola who did Dracula? Because there are some things that I'm just looking at it going like, it can't, it doesn't fit. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But before we get to all of that, okay, the screening that we went to, I think it's worth talking about this because, John, I mean, this was just funny, and we didn't expect this at all in this screening. Okay?
Go ahead.
You know where I'm going. With it. So John and I are sitting in the theater, and, whenever you go to one of these press screens or early screens, they always have, like, usually something on the screen. Usually it's a graphic for the movie. And then it cuts to the movie, like right when you get to the time. So we're sitting there and we're just like, okay, it's getting close to 8:30 and we're about to watch it. And, they're playing the soundtrack, which the soundtrack is kind of all over the place. But it cuts to a countdown. And John, like, you and I were like, is this now the countdown for the movie? What is going on? But it wasn't a countdown for a movie. It was the countdown for the pre-show. And boy, oh boy, the pre-show was something. So this was streamed live from the New York Film Festival. And it was a conversation with Francis Ford Coppola, Spike Lee, and Robert De Niro. John, what's your take on that whole conversation? Because I got some thoughts on it.
So first and foremost, we need to acknowledge the word live.
Very live.
Yeah. I think that this is maybe what, like, would you say it was like 45 minutes of them going back and forth?
I'd say give or take. I mean, no, I wouldn't say it's 45 minutes. I'd say it was probably, it felt like 45 minutes, but no, it was probably, I'd say a good 20 to 25 minutes.
I think it could have been like, if it had been something that they had, pre-recorded, or I like to call it recorded, they probably could have gotten it down to like 10 minutes long. On one hand, you had Coppola doing what like 80-year-old people do and just sitting in a position where somebody should have told him to sit up straight, because that was not an attractive pose for old Franny. But
it's not like he was a filmmaker who's like framed shots and things like that before.
Yeah, right.
Wouldn't know like the proper way to sit so you don't have like, your crotch just all hanging out.
But he's sitting there, can't really hear anything, and then he ends up mansplaining men. De Niro just doesn't give her zero fucks the entire time.
De Niro, I mean, he only answered like one or two questions the whole time there, and it was one of those things where it's like you got all these three like legends in cinema, and like you think any one of them is gonna let the other one breathe?
Well, the thing is, De Niro kind of reminded me of, like, going back old school, the Saturday Night Live sketch, the Joe Pesci show.
Yes.
And his partner was, was De Niro on the show, played by Colin Quinn. Yeah, and then just like it'd be like, "What do you think, Bobby?" A little bit, But then, on the other end, we got Spike Lee, who's trying to bring any life to this whatsoever. Bless his heart. But the thing is, it's kind of hard, as I imagine, because not my experience, as an African American man who has to deal with these two elder Italian men talk about the Italian experience, Italian, and he has to be like, "Yeah, I guess I could imagine." Maybe.
Well, it's also like you could tell that Spike Lee's like, I really love both of these guys. And even saying like, well, Francis, he let me see his movie early and I got to watch the 30 minutes of it. And then it was, let's watch more of it. And then of course I'm watching after the film and I'm going, there's no way in fucking hell Spike Lee was like, let me watch the rest of this. Like, I'm like, that was a line, dude. Come on. There's no way in hell.
But apparently, like, Spike Lee's students, because Spike teaches at NYU on Thursdays. And he showed it to his students.
He made a point to say on Thursdays.
Yeah. And like his students, I'm assuming had to like write a paper on it or something. And I'm telling you right now, if those students didn't suck Coppola's ass like he was their auntie, that's something from the movie, in case you're wondering, what did that mean, John? Then they did not get an A. It's like, Francis Ford Coppola is the greatest thing since the risen Jesus. And Spike Lee's like, good starting sentence. Yes.
Yeah, no, but what I think broke the interview, besides the whole just like watching these two elderly men try to tell you when they first met each other, because that was like a good 10 minutes of, oh, when did you meet? I don't know. I don't know. Weren't you a student? I don't know. Maybe. Like it was very much that. But I think what broke the interview was when Robert De Niro just went off the fucking rails and was just like, don't vote for Trump. Can you imagine if Trump, he literally said this
movie?
I kid you not. He literally said, can you imagine if Trump made this movie? And after watching the movie, I'm like, I think it would look a little bit something like what I just saw.
Although Shia LaBeouf would have been a lot better portrayed.
Shia LaBeouf would have been the main character, and yes, he would have won.
It would have been like, oh my god, his penis is so big it hits his knees and his nipples when he runs.
Yes, yes.
But
Yeah.
But no, so Coppola comes on with this kind of basically, I think what he abstractly wants you to take from the film, like the confluence of ideas that together as a society, if the populace can well, actually, I would say if the bourgeoisie and the intellectuals can somehow come to some kind of congruent message, the populace will join in, and that if we can just find some common ground at the end of the day, that we are all human beings, and as he kept saying, we are all each other's cousins, that maybe if we can find that common ground and gain the respect and appreciation of the masses together, that we can survive and we can prosper as not just a country or a city, as a country, as a world. And he's speaking so abstractly about philosophical ideas, and Coppola's like, so I'm very positive about the future. And this poor guy, this interviewer, who's shaking, by the way, he's just very super nervous. You could tell. He goes, well, Bobby, are you optimistic about the future? And Bob just goes, no. we got an orange idiot running for president, and let me tell you, there ain't no working with him. If he becomes president, we're all fucked. So don't vote for him. There's no hope. And you see Coppola, thank God he can't hear, because he's like, you just kind of shit all over my central premise I just said.
Oh, yeah, but it was kind of a train wreck. Like, that's what I think I would call it. It was a train wreck. And I know why they did it, and it was nice to see something that was live, and you really never get that, but it was just like, I don't think anyone had any idea that interview was going to go as train wreck of an interview as it was. No one knew that. But then we get to the movie, and before I get to the movie itself, I want to give first a synopsis, and then I want to talk a bit, John, about the journey this movie went through just to get screened. Like, that's the thing. It's part of the story of this fucking movie, is how this fucking movie got made. Okay? So first of all, the synopsis for this movie: in a decaying metropolis called New Rome, idealist architect Caesar Catalina is granted a license by the federal government to demolish and rebuild the city as a sustainable utopia using megalong, a material that can give him the power to control space and time. His nemesis, Mayor Franklin Cicero, remains committed to a regressive status quo. Torn between them is Franklin's socialite daughter and Caesar's love interest, Julia, who, tired of the influence she's inherited, searches for her life's meaning. Now, you might think, John, that sounds like an okay movie, right? Like, that sounds, if I saw that, I'd be like, oh, I might want to watch that. Everything in that synopsis is pretty much buried between style and more style.
And excess and drop stories. And drop storylines.
Yes. So what you hear there is absolutely there, but it's buried. And you as the audience, your job for the 2 hours something runtime is to try to find what I just read there amongst all of that. Okay.
Yeah, I pitched this, Brian, as Metropolis meets Caligula meets Hudsucker Proxy.
Yeah, that's very accurate.
And except for the really Hudsucker Proxy, which is, barring the eccentricities of it, is a pretty straightforward. The other two are kind of glorious hot messes, kind of like this movie. So
I don't care when anyone says I still love Caligula. I don't care.
Brian, there's a thing called the internet if you want to look at.
Yeah, I know. No shit. No shit. No shit. I still love Caligula because, like this movie, it's a ridiculous premise, and it's a ridiculous idea of having all of these high-end actors. Fucking Malcolm McDowell's in it. Helen Mirren's in it. I mean, you have Peter O'Toole in it, and it's bizarre, wacky, and it's all run by Bob Guccione. It's crazy. It's a crazy film. Okay? Crazy.
Well, Brian, I feel that Megalopolis, this movie suffers from what I call like Anton Firstitis. And for those that don't know,
only you and I would get that, John.
Is he was the brilliant among other movies. But the one that comes right to my mind is the production and art director of Batman '89, which won him an Oscar, understandably, because God, it's a gorgeous film to look at. But this movie, it's like, okay, it's New York City, but it's New Rome. It's the future, but it's also like the 50s, but it's also New York, but it's Rome, and sometimes it's ancient Rome, and it's all over the place. And as I mentioned to you, I don't know if contextually this was New York City and became New Rome, because there was one point, as you mentioned to me, that the last, say, like 20 years, Coppola's been picking up B-roll just to have it in the can. But there's one point where I see a flag that says NYSE, and if people don't know, that's the New York Stock Exchange. And later in the movie, you see NRPD on a card, New Rome Police Department. I don't understand why they couldn't have gone in post-production, paused and went, hey, look at that. It says NYSE. Let's just use post-production to paint over the NY and put RD for the, or NR rather, for the New Rome Stock Exchange. They just miss like stupid little mistakes like that.
I mean, I think honestly, John, that the line between reality and fiction in this movie are inherently blurred. I mean, he clearly is using stock footage that he captured from New York City and splicing it in with the stuff he's filming, probably still in, well, he filmed it in Atlanta, so it wouldn't be filmed in New York City, but he's splicing it in with the stuff that he's filmed that is set design for New Rome, but it's still supposed to be fucking New York City. Like, I don't care what anyone says. Like Cesar lives in the Chrysler building, for Christ's sake. Okay. You know, yeah. So, I mean, I that stuff didn't bother me that much. I think, especially if you look at it from the standpoint of like, he's clearly just saying New Rome instead of New York. Like, I honestly would have preferred if he just called it New York City, like a normal person.
Well, Brian, that raises a question that I want to propose to you. Is this supposed to be like an alternate timeline where instead of maybe like the Puritans kind of really settling this land, is this some alternate universe where Rome never really fell? It just changed, and like the Romans conquered North America and then we got to where we are? Or is this supposed to be the normal progress of New York City that eventually became New Rome? Because if it's supposed to be the former, how the fuck did we get the Statue of Liberty? How do we have 30 Rockefeller Center? Like, all those things are based on our history. And if there's a completely different history, when did the French send us a giant Liberty statue?
I mean, the truth is, John, is that this movie doesn't give us anything about that. Yeah. There is no backstory. There is no exposition. There's nothing. This is very much an imagined fictional world that Francis Ford Coppola has come up with. But even though it's supposed to be grounded in our own reality, it clearly isn't, though. You know, I don't have an answer for you. And that's what I'm saying. It's like, it would make more sense to me as a filmmaker if I'm trying to do the parable about the fall of the United States, which, let's be honest here, that is what this movie is about. Okay. It's equating the United States to the Roman Empire. Okay. And I think that's smart, personally, to make that connection, because there are a lot of similarities. And I'm not going necessarily into politics right now. I'm just saying there are a lot of similarities, but it kind of loses it when you've got this made up world of New Rome rather than just calling it New York City. It would make more sense. But no, I don't know. Like, that's the thing. We're not given any hints about that. And maybe that's because he doesn't want us to really care too much about the backstory. You know, I have a feeling, honestly, John, that this movie was made for an audience that doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah, because the film is political. And I mean, whether he'll admit it or not, but I honestly think that it might even be just unconsciously political. Like you can't live in the world and not, unless you're just completely just naive to the world around, to not have even an unconscious opinion about something, whether that's one side or the other or somewhere in the middle or on the anywhere in between. So like, as much as he wants to be like, oh, we use canceled actors in this movie because this isn't about Trump, this isn't about Harris, because we're releasing in a political year, and I'm not saying it is, but there are very much themes to the world that we're living in right now, and I don't think that I'm reaching when I say that. There are characters in this that are supposed to be representative of people that are in our world right now.
Oh, 100%. 100%. That's not even a stretch. That's just the way the film is structured. Before we get deeper into this, I want to talk a bit about the backstory of it. Okay.
Yes, please do.
So, as I mentioned at the top of the show, Coppola had been working on this thing since 1977. That's how long. Okay. He was working on this thing while he was making Apocalypse Now. Okay. It has had false starts. It's had rewrites. It's had literally going into production and then stopping literally up until 2021. I kid you not. Okay. This is considered like his magnum opus. This is what he's wanted to do for decades. Okay. There were events that got in the way of this movie being made. The first one being 9/11. Okay. That prevented this movie from being made because a tragedy that strikes the city is a major plot point in this film.
Well, Brian, just to interrupt you real quick, just to point out the fact that the first interruption of this movie being made was 9/11. That's 25 years after he's starting to even dabble ideas. So,
well, to be fair, part of the reason why there was such a delay was he had such a string of bad movies. Not necessarily bad movies, but just financially, they were not returning on the investment. So he had to take like priority of making these other films that were not Megalopolis just to keep the lights on, right? So like that's where his priority, and this was kind of his film that's like, one of these days I'll make this film. This will be my passion film. It'll get made eventually, but things just got in the way. And I can honestly relate to that. I think all of us have, as filmmakers, we have that movie that we are like, this is going to be my thing. This is going to be my passion film. It will get made one day. I just need the money for it, or I just need the resources, or I need to find the right people, and it'll eventually get done. But then just life gets in the way. And I think that's what Megalopolis is for Francis. This is the life got in the way, and I'm eventually going to make this fucking movie before I fucking die. Okay?
Well, anybody can say that. I mean, just even if you don't have a passion project, how many times does anybody in any part of go, oh, how the fuck is it already March? Holy shit, next week is Memorial Day. Oh, man, the leaves are changing. Oh, God, Christmas is right around the corner. Like, where does the time go?
No, you're right. But he eventually decided, starting in 2019, to actually make this a reality. And what he did is ballsy as all fuck. I mean, it is for a filmmaker to do this, this literally is the equation of putting your money where your mouth is. This man obviously is wealthy. He is made, outside of film, he's made a tremendous amount of money in the winery game. So he sold a portion of his winery and was able to take $120 million set aside to make this movie. And it's his own money. Like, no studio gave him money to make this. This is all him. And that's a good thing and a bad thing. So we'll get down in later. But I mean, this is all Francis Ford Coppola. Now, this film did screen at the Cannes Film Festival, and it struggled to get distribution. Okay, this movie struggled to get distribution. More likely because of the fact that it is not a superhero film. It's not it's 100% original. Okay, it's not based off of a property. and it's a very bizarro story. Okay. And it's also political. That's the other side of it too. So
it should have been Alien versus Megalopolis. Yeah.
Oh, can you imagine that? Can you imagine Alien versus Megalopolis, or Caesar being able to stop time when an alien's coming to get him?
Yeah. Right before the face hugger goes through, saying,
yes,
stop time.
Stop time. We just made a better movie.
Oh, no, we did not.
5 seconds. No, 5 seconds. Yes, we did. Yes, we did. But ultimately, Lionsgate ended up taking up this film. And I think also the fact that he really was like talking with the IMAX people too, to try to get them and be like, oh yeah, IMAX. Ooh, like you show my movie on IMAX screens. So like that was kind of the incentive to get distribution. I'll be the first to tell you right now, and I think I'm probably going to be right on this. Maybe if I'm wrong, I will be pleasantly surprised. I don't think this movie is going to make anywhere near its budget at all. I don't see it making $10 million. John, what do you think?
I couldn't agree with you more. I think, yeah, it'll probably hit around like 10 million worldwide. Yeah, this is going to be, you know what? It might actually do better overseas, but in the States, it's going to absolutely bomb. But at the same time, I don't know if Coppola even gives a shit.
I don't think he gives a shit either. I don't think he cares.
I can't remember the name of the movie, but I remember many moons ago, I was watching a biography on Clint Eastwood, and he made a movie about jazz, and Clint loves him some jazz music. And I remember him turning to, I think, like a cinematographer or something after he yelled cut, and he goes, I don't care if nobody ever watches this. This is like my favorite film that I ever made. And I think that he honestly believed that. I think that film, whatever it's called, sorry, I'm blanking. Like, I think it did just fine. But like, I think that Coppola was like, I made this movie. I've always wanted to make this movie. I use my own goddamn money. I don't even care if a fucking soul ever goes and see it except my buddies, because so yeah, I don't think he even cares. But I think you're right. I think this movie's just going to be too goddamn weird, too hard to market. And I just don't see anybody outside of like major Coppola fans, film snobs, or people who are just intrigued by the inner workings of the movie business going and seeing this. Joe Schmo and Jane Schmo, who just want to go have a good time in the movies, aren't going to be like, let's go see Megalopolis this weekend. I don't see it happening.
No, they're going to go see Transformers, or they're going to go see Beetlejuice.
Yeah, which is fine.
Which is fine. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, I mentioned earlier in the show that I think that this movie was made for an audience that doesn't exist anymore. And what I meant by that is that the audience that is going to the movies nowadays is not the audience that even we had, say, back in the 90s, and I think it's because we've been raised on franchise films. We've been raised on everything has to be tied to a property. Everything has to have popular appeal to some degree. Everything has to have a pre-built fan base, right? And no movie can be too original, too weird, too experimental. And I think that the audience that goes to the movies nowadays, their attention span is much shorter than it was 20 years ago. So they're expecting something quick, something happy, something fun, something scary, very base emotion, no subtext, not allowed to think. That's what they want. And so this movie doesn't work for those people.
This, to me, really reeks of late 60s, kind of early 70s, kind of art house hitting the mainstream, but on like a $1 budget. Like, it reminds me of like Midnight Cowboy, Panic in Needle Park, Scarecrow, Five Easy Pieces, but just with, Titanic budget,
Yeah. Well, I mean, I told
audience isn't there anymore.
That's what I'm saying. And I told you in the car, this movie was like, if you took a narrative and you took an art house film, experimental film, and they made it, and this is what you got. You know, there are moments in this film that clearly have a narrative thread, and you can follow it. But then there are other moments in this movie that's just so fucking out there. And you're just like, what does this have anything to do with any of the story that I've been set up with? I mean, there is a sequence in which, and I don't care if I'm spoiling this shit. There's a sequence
Spoilers.
where, yeah, spoilers. But there's a sequence where Cesar is at Madison Square Garden in this world, and
Madison Square Garden still exists. Okay,
it still exists because it's, let's be honest here, New Rome is New York.
But it's the Coliseum. Sorry,
it's
I keep interrupting you. Go ahead.
That's cool. It's cool. So, you know, he decides to go in a drug-fueled bender in the middle of all of this. And like, as this is going on, you know, there's gladiatorial fights, there's chariot races, there's and I didn't realize this until after we got out of the theater. There is a virgin auction, like for a Taylor Swift archetype
that Roger Stone wins.
What was that?
That Roger Stone wins.
Yes, that Roger Stone wins.
Yeah, Dustin Hoffman basically plays Roger Stone in this.
Yeah.
If for those that are politically inclined and know who that is.
He pays, what is it? What was it, like $10 million to fuck Taylor Swift?
Oh, I think it was like $100 million, which I think was Coppola's, that in this world, money is even more absurdly distributed to the wealthy, where he kind of just does $100 million like, shucks, it's nothing.
Yeah. But it is so bizarre. So all this shit is happening. Okay, that's what the title of this movie should be. All this shit is happening.
All this shit is happening.
All this shit is happening. A fable. And yeah, Adam Driver decides to go on a drug-fueled bender, and like, you've got these bizarro scenes where there's hands around him. He's getting the shit kicked out of him at one point, and it's honestly because his little asshole prick of a cousin decides to make a fake video showing Cesar having sex with Taylor Swift. And I'm not saying Taylor Swift is it. I'm just saying the archetype of the character is Taylor Swift, or any pop star if you want to. You know, obviously 20 years ago it would have been Britney Spears. Okay.
Yeah.
But we're just saying that right now. I'm not Taylor Swift. Please don't sue. But I'm just saying,
or Swifties, don't come after us.
Oh, don't come after us. Don't come after us. I'm just saying that, you know, this is all happening in one set piece. Okay. All of the shit is happening in one set piece. And it's so bizarre and it's so hard to follow because it's just all over the place. And like, you've got moments like that, but then you also have really good moments where I thought that the moments between Cesar and Julia were really good. You know, I thought that they did have a chemistry. I thought they did work well together. There were some moments that were like, this is clearly like kind of dry humor, and very dry delivery. But then there are also some moments when they generally do care. And I honestly attribute that to, I know Coppola's process. He does a lot of rehearsals. He has his actors do things outside of just the scene so that they do get used to working each other. He did it in Bram Stoker's Dracula, and I imagine he did it here. So those moments were fine, but it's all mixed and mashed together with these just absurd fucking moments.
Well, Brian, I got a couple of things to respond to that.
It's a lot, I know.
One thing is, I am 100% with Coppola in this sense that the actors do the work and you're there kind of like as a coach and just kind of like to help lead them in the right direction. I'm an actor's director myself. I believe that to be completely true as well. But there is a point where sometimes you can maybe do too many rehearsals and things can get a little too free. And as a director, that is also your job to wrangle things in. That there's a very scene early on that very much looks like something you see out of an Orson Welles movie where people are up on scaffolding looking at options for the city, and Adam Driver's character comes in and he's doing like these pantomime things that I know is probably just something that when he was like free and loose in auditions that he was trying, and there was a lot of freedom, so he did it. But there was one point where I'm like, this is kind of silly now. And he should have been wrangled in just a little bit. The reason actors go over the top, other than some that do it organically, is because the director didn't tell them to wrangle it in. They can't see themselves on a monitor. The director can. But to talk about more of the abstract kind of surrealist scenes, I'm not disagree with you. Just I have a different taste on that kind of stuff. As a huge David Lynch fan, I don't mind mixing my narrative with surrealism. That doesn't bother me at all. In fact, I kind of like the scene with all of his arms growing, and clearly we're seeing his drug bender.
I like that scene, but it doesn't fit with what the fuck is going on.
Right.
I
can understand that, but what I had a problem with is how there are just narrative threads and character things that just disappear because this is a 40-year written script. And that scene that Brian's talking about in particular is that out of nowhere, because he seemed like a guy who's focused only on his work, is that Adam Driver's character Cesar is now like a drug-filled playboy, which doesn't fit with anything else in the rest of the movie, nor does it ever show up again. But his drug addiction, it comes up one other time earlier where Aubrey Plaza, who's his mistress, I don't know how you can be a mistress when he doesn't have a wife, but anyways, but his mistress goes, you're still taking them pills. And he goes, at least I'm trying to quit. But then after the whole scene that Brian just broke down, it's never brought up again. Never mentioned again. And this is just one of so many just drop plot lines. It's like, I was like, what is this? Batman Returns?
Hey, now. That's my job to bring up and complain about Batman Returns, not yours, John.
Sorry.
No, but you're right. I mean, let's be honest here. The biggest one, and the one that I've seen every fucking trailer show that is dropped, is Caesar's magical ability to stop fucking time.
We need to discuss it, Caesar.
We need to talk about this. This is important.
Caesar's God.
God, Jesus.
Yeah.
Some other deity. Yeah, this man in the first couple frames is introduced to have the ability to stop literal time. Like, that is this man's power. He can stop time on command. It's shown probably, I'd say, about 3 or 4 times. It's brought up at a plot point later in the film that he's lost that ability, but we don't have any explanation about how the fuck he got this power, how the fuck he was put into a position of being the head of the design authority for the fucking government, and none of that is ever fucking explained. It's just shown that, hey, this guy can stop time. And that's where John brought up Hudsucker Proxy, because that actually does literally happen in the movie.
Well, a lot of the architecture and set design look like Hudsucker Proxy.
Oh yeah, totally. But it's a major plot point that's never ever explained or brought up. He has the power, loses it, has it again, but that's it.
Well, and this is where, and not to use my catchphrase, but I have like so many questions.
I knew you were going to say that. I fucking knew it.
It's like everybody thinks this guy who don't worship at his altar think that he's a hack fraud. Has he ever stopped time for anybody else? But how also can you guys think this guy's a hack fraud when he's basically built a new scientific element? Whether you think it's safe or not, he's built a new scientific element. It doesn't make any sense. And when he stops time, does he just stop time for himself? Is he basically taking time away from him, or is he taking time away from the rest of us? Like, what happens if somebody has 6 weeks to live and he stops time for 6 months? When they come back, does that person just instantly die, or they actually appear again as a decayed person because they died long ago during the time freeze? Like, what is what happens during this time freeze, and why do we not get a single answer to his powers, how he got them, why, what is he going to do with them? Because basically the man is God, but all he wants to do is create like a nice area where there's movable walkways.
I don't think he wants to make a nice area where there's movable walkways. I think his whole premise is that he wants equality. He wants the absence of the stuff that makes things corrupt. And I think that's the big thing, is he wants this utopia in which we are, which honestly only exists in his mind. And in his mind, it's all built around with this substance that he has invented called Megalon, which never explained how he invented it. Again, another plot point that's never explained. And the thing about the time thing that never got, I didn't understand, and this bugged me, is usually when you have a character that has a power like that, sometime in the movie, it is explained that there is a cost for it, right? Like there's always a cost. And there's no cost for Cesar in his time ability. I mean, you could say that his, spoiler alert, dead wife might be the cost. It's, again, never explained. But, like, that's the thing, is we don't know anything about this time-stopping ability other than he can do it, and that's the reason why he's in charge of design authority for the city, why he's able to stop buildings and, you know, then have them... Like, it's so convoluted. And, again, this is part of the reason why I say this movie is held back by the bullshit style and drop plot points that get in the way of the message. You know, this is Coppola unleashed and unbound. That's who this movie is for. It's him. And I mentioned this to John, you know, in the car ride back. I'm like, this movie reminds me of Bram Stoker's Dracula. And the reason why is because initially when Coppola wanted to make Dracula, I kid you not when I tell you this, there's literally there's a documentary on the making of Dracula, specifically on the costumes, and he wanted the costumes to be the only set piece in the films. He wanted like minimalist, black box style, little bit of lighting here and there, but the costumes would be the thing. And someone had to tell him that's not gonna sell. Okay? And what this movie is missing is someone telling him, hey, this shit isn't gonna sell. This shit is getting in the way of what you're trying to fucking say.
And that's the problem when you're an 80-some-year-old icon who has what is considered 4 of the greatest films ever made. And some filmmakers are lucky to have one of what is considered the greatest films of all made. This guy has 4 that nobody has the guts to stand up to him and question him, especially when he's self-funding the whole fucking thing. Like, there's no executive, you know, like from Paramount or Warner Brothers, like, you're spending my money on what? You know, it's his own money. And it reminds me of the boys over Red Letter Media on YouTube when they did their Plinkett reviews of the Star Wars prequels, how nobody said no to George Lucas because, well, he's George Star Wars Lucas. Nobody has the guts to stand up to him and go, hey, George, that doesn't add up. Or, hey, George, that's a plot thread that's never finished. Or, oh, hey, George, I don't know if Jar Jar is going to work. And this is the exact thing that we get here with this film. Who the hell is going to tell a guy this is his passion project that's been in the works for 40 years that he's self-financing, who has one of the greatest filmmakers in American cinema? Who's going to fucking tell him no? And nobody did.
I mean, as far as I can tell, no one told him no. If someone told him no, I would be surprised. But what I'm seeing on the screen, John, is not that. What I'm seeing is every idea thrown up. And don't get me wrong, some of those ideas are good. You know, there's a sequence in this where Cesar is in his car and Lawrence Fishburne is his driver, and they're driving through the bad part of the city, like the shitty part. And all around this bad part, you have these massive living statues that are crumbling.
Mhm.
And they're statues of like justice and, you know, just these other statues of basically they're aspects of our society visualized, and they're crumbling all around. Okay. And it's a very striking image, and I love things like that. And then we cut to scenes with Shia LaBeouf. And it's like, what the fuck is going on here? Because you can't do both. And in this movie, you got both. So like that's the conundrum. And that's why like I can't hate this movie, and I don't hate this movie. What I feel is just like, what the hell is going on with the filmmaker that I honestly revere? You know, Francis Ford Coppola got his start in horror movies. And as a horror fan, that hits really hard for me.
He's a Corman baby.
He's a Corman baby. He made Dementia 13, you know? So like, and he rose from the ranks of making B movies to then making one of the greatest films, two of the greatest films ever, Godfather Part 2. And that's not even talking about his other films like Apocalypse Now,
Conversation.
Conversation, Bram Stoker's Dracula. So this man is immensely talented. And I don't know what the fuck is going on other than it just being his age. And I don't like to say that because I don't believe that filmmaking is a young man's game. I think that if you've got the vision and you've got the ability, then you can make movies until you're dead. I don't care. But I mean, it's a thing where I think with this one, no one told the man no. And he looked at it more just like, you know what? I'm going to throw everything in this thing. I don't care. It's my movie. No one's going to tell me no. No studio's going to tell me no. And he got to figure, like, this is a man who's had a history of every studio that he's ever worked with, every executive telling him no to something. You know, you watch, what the hell series was it, John, that they did on The Godfather, in the making of The Godfather? You know what I'm talking about?
Yes. I'm trying to think of the streaming network or the name of it.
Well, it was Paramount. It was Paramount Plus.
Oh, of course.
And it was a fictionalized account of the making of The Godfather. They pulled in a lot of stuff though that was real, and it was about Al Ruddy, the producer of The Godfather. And you realize that this, you know, every time they went to Francis Ford Coppola, he was fighting everything tooth and nail. He couldn't have Al Pacino. They wanted to have someone else. You know, he couldn't get Robert De Niro because they had to throw in James Caan. You know, he's always been up against and fighting everyone. And this is his baby where he's like, I'm not fighting shit.
Well,
I'm going to do everything I fucking want.
Some points to the level of absurdity, this and again, apologies, Brian and I can't remember the name of it, but this but dramatic reinterpretation of what it was to make The Godfather. There's a scene in it where Coppola, and this is a true fact, if you've read any like the makings of, that he wanted a real kitchen so they could be cooking in scenes. And they're like, are you out of your fucking mind? Do you have any idea what that would cost? And they don't need to be actually cooking. This is a movie. It's a magic trick. It's a fucking lie. And he's just fighting and fighting. And they're like, we don't have any more money left. And you want us to blow an astronomical amount of money on a real kitchen that we're not even going to be able to cook because there's going to be smoke. There's going to be all kinds of things that mess up the cinematography. And I'm like, okay, I can get where Coppola is a stubborn son of a bitch, sometimes to his own huge detriment.
I mean, Jesus Christ, John, look at the Heart of Darkness documentary. You know, his making of Apocalypse Now. The movie nearly killed him and other people on that set.
I don't necessarily blame that one on him. I blame that on everyone and nature and God. Well, not God, but yeah.
Right, but you know what I mean, like he had cost overruns. He had difficulty with actors. He had difficulty with things. Like this man has been in the face of adversity left and right. And so this is his one chance where he's in complete financial control. And I just get the feeling that he just said, you know what? I don't care. I'm going to do whatever I want because I've never had that ability. But I will go with this here. This is a lesson that John and I learned in grad school. Okay? Constraints aren't a bad thing. They are actually a good thing because it teaches you restraint. It teaches you how to deal with obstacles. And in those moments of dealing with obstacles, you get the creativity that shows up on screen.
Well, and to that point, I would ask anybody, and unless you're one of those people that hate all of them, which I can understand, for anybody that likes the movies, what's the best Saw movie? And I think anybody, hopefully, unless they're a contrarian, will say the first one.
First one's always the best one.
Usually. I think Godfather 2 is better than Godfather 1, speaking of Coppola. Anyways, sidebar there. But the reason it's so good is that these young filmmakers said, we want to make a feature, but we have to deal with the constraints of money and time. So it's like, maybe we'll write a story that mostly takes place in one room. Okay, well, how do we do that? And and they took their limitations and they elevated them into like a positive. Mm-hmm. It wasn't, and you wonder, like, what would the movie have been if, like, some crazy, like, hey, I'm so crazy, catch an oral tycoon, and I want to give you an extra $250 million to make this movie. It wouldn't have been as good. It would have been Mega Opus.
Well, I wish that there was some producer on this that just would have told Francis, like, hey, ask yourself this question. Is what you're going to do on this scene, does it take away from your message? That's it. And speaking of the message, like, I broke down who I think these characters are. Because again, like, the message is important, I think. And like, for me, at least, as someone who does like to have more layers, I see this is the message I see.
Hey, Brian, and yeah, for the audience, Brian broke this down on, like, the car ride home, and I was like, I think you fucking nailed it on the head. So
yeah. So the message that I got out of this film, and what I would first of all, I'll tell anyone, go see this movie. You know why I would say go see this movie? And this is important, worth a solo shot right here. Okay, for our camera audience. Go see this movie because, love it or hate it, it's fucking original. For all of the problems that it has, and it has many, when was the last time that you went into a theater and saw something that was original and challenged the medium in a way like this, even if it doesn't work? Okay? So how I interpreted the message of this film, and what you'll probably get, is that this movie in essence is about three characters that I saw. Okay. One, you've got Cicero, who is played by Giancarlo Esposito, who he does a great job in this movie. And honestly, like, not surprising at all. I mean, he's Gus Fring, for fuck's sake. Okay. But he, in essence, is the status quo. He is the corruption. He is consumed with money and maintaining power. And you're not going to hear me say left or right, because he's not left or right. He's all of them. He is what we're all dealing with. He is the status quo. Okay. Whether that be Democrat or Republican. Okay. And the status quo likes the way things are. Cesar, for me, at least what I saw, he represents the unfettered idealism that you can see a better world, but it requires that we tear down what we currently have. Okay. And I get this a lot. Whenever I've had conversations with, like, my mom or boomers in particular, and I bring up, and John, I'm sure you probably have had this too. And I bring up things that I'm like, we don't have to exist in a world like we have now. We don't have to be, it doesn't have to be well, you have to choose between, food on your table or healthcare, or it doesn't have to be that you have to choose left or right, or don't have to be like, whenever I bring up those things, every time, whenever it gets to a point, ultimately, like, you go back and forth argument, and ultimately one side, and usually it's the boomer side. I'm sorry for those people who are boomers who are listening to us. I'm not targeting you. I'm just telling you the truth. Eventually I will hear, well, you can't change it. It's the way it is. And John, I don't know if you've heard that when you've had conversations with those people. They always say, well, that's just the way it's always been.
Oh, yeah. Left and right. Absolutely.
Yes.
And not to get overly political here, but you hear that even from pro-gun people.
Absolutely.
Non-gun changes. Well, you can't do anything about mass shootings. It is what it is.
Yeah, no, but I'm not even necessarily talking about that. I'm just saying, like, I'll be the first person to tell you, I have not enjoyed any of the past elections we've had. And and that's coming from both sides of the aisle.
Nor should you. I mean, it's a fucking...
But it's a thing where ultimately you're told, well, you've got to pick one. And it's like, well, why do we have to pick one? And whenever that question gets asked, like, well, you like, their brains go, blah, 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 like it breaks. And I see Cicero as that brain going, blah, 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 like going nuts. And Cesar is that question of, why do we have to exist in a world like this? Why can't we attain better? And his big thing, and why he's a threat, is he actually has the ability to realize those dreams. That is what makes him a danger to every other character in this film. He is not just saying it as, well, why can't we do this? He actually has the means to make that a reality. And that is dangerous.
But Brian, I think that this film does do a good job of saying that Cesar is imperfect. Like, he's taking people down with him, and that is...
I never said he wasn't imperfect. I just said he's unfettered.
But I think that's John Unfetterman. No, it's a good debate. Where he's hurting people in the process, and you hear this all the time, whether it's a good faith or bad faith argument of things that we need to do for global warming. People are like, you're going to take away all these jobs from people who work in the fossil fuel industry and the coal industry, and like, oh, we need to limit the amount of cows because, like it or not, folks, the cows burping, of all things, and there being so many of them, lead to problems with our atmosphere. And they're like, oh, you're going to take away jobs from cow farmers. And technically, yes, but it's for the greater good of the country. And the hope would be that we would find something for them. Like, there are so many times where it's like, yes, we maybe have to get rid of coal jobs, but we're going to retrain them in renewable processing jobs. So, but the idea being, in order for the greater overall future, who are you going to sacrifice in the process of creating that?
Oh, absolutely. And there's a scene in this where, Caesar's cousin, played by Shia LeBauf.
Well, we kind of gloss over this. Yeah, Shia LeBauf is...
Oh, we're not done. We're not done. We have to talk about him and Aubrey Plaza in this. But Shia LaBeouf basically plays he plays Caesar's cousin, who is in essence a archetype for Donald Trump. Okay, that's what this man is.
There's no question about it.
There's zero question that is who this person is. And what he does is he uses Caesar's flaw in that, what John just brought up about, yeah, you want to create this utopia. Yeah, you have that ability, but who is it going to really hurt? He tears down buildings that were homes of these people. The jobs were lost to these people. And what does someone like Claude Pulcher Crassus do? He whips them up and creates fascism out of them. Okay. He uses that fear. He uses their insecurities. He uses their problems that they're facing now against them and whips them up into a mob and uses it against Caesar, which ultimately leads into a scene which is extremely shocking, which I don't want to go into. But yeah, I mean, it's a thing where Caesar, unfortunately, his flaw is he cannot see what is affecting people now. And Cicero is only looking at what is affecting people now at the expense of the future. So that's the dichotomy here.
Yeah. And this movie, it spells it out in the sense that, okay, this Shia LaBeouf character is the ungrateful, unbridled son of a rich man who never had to suffer a day in his life, never had to work for anything in his life, who sees an opportunity. And as some of the female characters in the movie describes, like, he might not be very smart, but he's very charismatic and he knows how to rile up the dullards, or something along those lines. And I'm like, so this is Trump?
Oh no, it's not even it's not even necessarily. It's so blatantly obvious. Yeah. And he acts like an absolute fucking fool at every turn. He's also having probably the most fun out of everyone in this movie. Like Adam Driver's trying to play it straight. He's trying to play it like
as he always does. Yeah.
As he always does. But then again, there's also moments when he is like when he ends up getting injured and he's like just screaming uncontrollably, and it's like I can't help but laugh. Like when he's talking to Aubrey Plaza and he's got half of his face covered and he's just going like I was giggling because it's so fucking weird. But yeah, Shia LaBeouf is having fun in this. Aubrey Plaza, oh man, like I feel bad for her because I've seen her act in things and be really good. She is just something fucking else in this movie.
Well, Brian, the internet apparently, and I try to avoid anybody else's for fear that it will coax my opinion on something listening to somebody else. I usually try not to watch any other reviews until we do our show, but I wasn't looking for reviews necessarily, but I was looking for a little more contextualization of this film after we saw it. Like, oh, was there something maybe I missed, because there's so much weird shit happening in this movie. And it seems like most of the people that I saw kind of giving a breakdown of this really loved Aubrey Plaza's performance. I didn't care one way or another about it myself.
John, I look at it as they loved Aubrey Plaza's performance the way that people love Tommy Wiseau's performance.
No, you're tearing me apart, Copolla.
That's what I'm saying is both her and Shia LaBeouf, they're the Tommy Wiseau of this movie. They are 100%. They're chewing up every bit of scenery in this in the worst way possible. The moments when Aubrey Plaza first went on screen, I was like, is this an indie film? Like, is this like a low budget? Like, because it looks low budget at times. Mm-hmm. And I'm just like, what the fuck is going on?
Yeah. So Aubrey Plaza, amongst other things that happened to her in this story, she's the host of like a news program, kind of like Extra or Inside Edition. If you know what your grandma watches, one of those kind of salacious, news scandal, popular media, celebrity kind of shows. And I will say that the effects they did for her show looked like something that like I would make. And I'm not working on a $120 million Francis Ford Coppola movie. So basically I'm saying like that I'm insulting the graphics of this movie because I feel like I could make that.
Yeah, some of the graphics in this and visual effects in this were they range the gamut, honestly. Like some of them were really good, and then some of them were like, what the fuck are you doing? And like every one of her on television scenes was very much like that. But then you also had some really good scenes. Like I really liked the moments when they were up on like the top of the building and you've got the giant clock thing and they're stopping time. That stuff felt realistic, even if we know it was a green screen, right? But there are just some other weird things, like they have title cards in this that clearly were Photoshop. Like,
yeah,
they just look like Photoshop. And I'm like, what the fuck is going on?
they could have done white text on black background. It would have.
Yeah,
But they wanted that whole Roman like.
Yeah, I get that, but like, it just felt like those things were an after thought rather than like, hey, we need to do this. And I mean, if you know the way Francis Ford Coppola feels about VFX and CGI, it shouldn't be surprising. The man fired all of his CGI artists in Dracula and decided to hire his son on that movie. It worked. In this movie, so much. But yeah, I mean, getting back to Aubrey Plaza, her name is Wow Platinum.
It's very Hunger Games. Isn't it?
Yeah, Hunger Games. That's the best word for it. It's very Hunger Games. Yeah. I mean, what else to say? Oh, I have reviews. I didn't tell you this. I gathered some LETTERBOXD.
You got some reviewsies.
I got some reviewsies. Okay, for those of you who are unaware of how this works, I went through LETTERBOXD. I pulled 4 random reviews. John does not know anything about these reviews, right? John, you don't know about anything about them?
Yes, Mr. Copperfield. I have no idea.
Awesome. All right, so let's go through these one at a time here. All right. So review number 1 here is, what if an octogenarian wine baron made Southland Tales? Received the sort of applause from a sold-out IMAX audience that you might hear after a screening of The Room. I would sell my soul for just 5 seconds with Wow Platinum. Just imagine Donald Trump trying to direct this movie. It wouldn't work. Robert De Niro during the live stream panel discussion that preceded the screening.
That review was almost as much of a hot mess as that fucking panel was. And Brian, before you respond, why didn't they get like, I know obviously you want Robert De Niro and Spike Lee because they're humongous names, but why didn't you get like the cinematographer and Adam Driver as part of the panel? Why did you get 2 other people who were part of the movie and not De Niro, who's just like, fuck Trump, fuck Trump. And Spike Lee's like, yeah, when did we meet? Francis, when did we meet? He's like, hey, who are you?
Yeah, I mean, that would be the smart move. But let's be honest here. They were like, well, we can give you Spike Lee and Robert De Niro, or do you want Adam Driver and whoever the cinematographer was? They were like, well, we'll take Robert De Niro and Spike Lee because they're Robert De Niro and Spike Lee. So, yeah, I mean, it's a very bizarre fucking movie. The whole Wow Platinum thing. So it's no secret that Aubrey Plaza is extremely sexual in this movie, and I say that with not a grain of salt, like with gigantic, fuck ton of salt. Because like there are multiple scenes where you can see her breasts. She has this very bizarro scene with Shia LaBeouf.
Oh, she's grinding, humping, sucking. Well, I mean, all like in movie world. I'm not
in movie
literally.
World. All right, let's go to review number 2. Review number 2. 40 years worth of ideas narratively and technically packed into its clusterfuck of a 2-hour and 20-minute runtime, none of which come together to form any semblance of cohesion, overwhelming and suffocating experience. Ouch.
Suffocating. That's an interesting
word there. Suffocating.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know if I would call it suffocating. I think it's style interfering with the conveyance of the message. That's what I would go with.
Maybe relentless might be a better word.
Yeah, relentless. I don't know if I would go with suffocate because I've already said I don't hate this movie.
Me neither. Yeah,
I can't hate this movie. It's not possible. I mean, it is what it is. Like that's what it is. This is Coppola at his most unbound. Take it or leave it. Is it great? No. Is it bad? Is it terrible? Is it the worst thing I've ever seen? No. I've seen Neil Breen movies. That shit is the worst stuff I've ever seen. I would take Megalopolis over every Neil Breen fucking movie ever. Okay. But yeah, I don't know if I would call it suffocating, but I get the idea that this style in this is interfering. Mm-hmm. John, would you agree?
Yeah, I think that's a fair statement, and I think as we put, that this is him at his most relentless. Like, let's take a movie that we said, like, thank God this isn't a comic book movie, and I'll compare it to The Dark Knight. Is that The Dark Knight it's not, folks, this isn't Ant-Man, this isn't Thor Ragnarok, like, this is a comic book movie to try to take itself very, very seriously. But there are moments of levity in that movie, and I don't think there are in here, in the sense that, yes, somebody could say, like, oh, well, I laughed a bunch of times in the movies, but those weren't laughs that were let-ups. Those were, you were again laughing at the relentless absurdity of this movie. Those weren't like, oh, I finally had a chance to breathe and I'm actually looking at a real human being in a real moment. No, it was, you were laughing at that this movie does not let you have a moment to breathe. Kind of reminds me of a movie from, 2 years ago? Was it Babylon?
Yeah, I got Babylon vibes out of this. I definitely did.
Somebody that doesn't have any control, with a long runtime, who has a love of the medium and just wants you to know it. I don't want you to fucking breathe, motherfucker.
Yeah. But at least that did have a plot that was easy to understand.
Yeah.
It did have a plot that was easy to understand. All right, let's go to review number 3 here. I had been waiting for this release of this film in the same way that Christians await the second coming of Christ.
So how'd you think?
How'd it go? How'd it go then?
It kind of reminds me of those people that were so desperately waiting for Axl Rose's Chinese Democracy for that album to come out, and then it was kind of like, it is what it is,
this ain't good.
Whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're a devotee of Coppola, you probably were like let down. Or you're lying to yourself. It's either one or the other. Either you were severely let down, or you're lying to yourself, telling people like it's the greatest thing since Apocalypse Now. It's one or the other. I admire him as a filmmaker for what he's done, and the success he's had, and relentlessly dealing with adversity and still making the movies that he wants to. And he's had a lot of success. This ain't one of them. Okay. It's not one of them.
It's not a disaster either.
It's not a disaster.
It's Megalopolis.
But let's be honest here. This makes Jack look like an Oscar-worthy film.
I don't agree with that.
You don't agree with that? You love Jack?
No, I despise Jack, and
I'm saying this is. I would say Jack is better than this.
I don't agree with that.
Okay.
Well, agree to disagree on that one, Brad.
Agree to disagree, John. Yeah. Okay, let's go to our last review here. If Shakespeare played Animal Crossing, smoked a joint, and then watched The Hunger Games, Tomorrowland, and Enter the Void back to back, and JoJo Siwa rebrand somehow? What the fuck?
I think what this individual is trying to get across here, in a very capricious way, and avoiding all brevity, is that this film is a hint convoluted.
Just a hint convoluted.
Yeah.
The JoJo Siwa rebrand. I saw this review and I was just like, I have to include it because it's so fucking funny. And you can even tell, like, this one like has 884 likes. And this was from May, granted, like, so it was probably during the Cannes screener.
Well, this is just yet another one of the not one but multiple drop storylines of. So again, just to take us back, and for those that haven't seen the movie, just want to hear us talk about it. There is this virgin superstar. So it's like part Britney Spears, part Taylor Swift. So it's the most popular artist in the world. So it's Taylor Swift meets like the whole Britney Spears version of that era, say what, like 20, 22, 23 years ago, whatever. So that this character is amalgamation of those two things, and she's selling her virginity off. And then there is a fake video to sabotage Cesar, where it's basically a fake digitized video of him in bed with this pop star, and then it turns out to be fake. So, and then she comes out, this pop star comes out with like a new branded thing. So let's recap. We have Shia LaBeouf's character's attempt to assassinate his cousin Caesar's personality. Doesn't work. Barely is mentioned. Say, oh, it's dropped. Who cares? The pop star becomes more like punk and edgy and stuff. Never seen again. Doesn't matter. The whole idea of her appearing in the film doesn't matter. The whole about of her selling her virginity doesn't go anywhere. And then as a result of all this, Cesar now becomes emotionally impotent because of what happened to him, and he can't stop time anymore until his lady comes up via Matrix style and goes, no, the power of boners will save you. And then he gets a boner.
I was waiting for it. I knew you were going down that path. I'm like, the power of boners will save you.
And then he can stop time again. And so it was like almost as quickly as that whole story arc started, it ended. Like, again, I love this movie, probably not for the right reasons, but I love this movie. But it is a fucking mess. It was a goddamn mess.
It's a goddamn mess. It's a beautiful fucking mess.
Yeah.
That's what this movie is. Megalopolis is a beautiful fucking mess. But, I mean, what else is there to say, John?
Oh, I think we kind of hit on all the big issues.
This was like therapy. This was the therapy session. Like, we came out of the theater and like we haven't done one of these like go to an early screener thing in a while. So like we came out of the theater, we're just like, yeah, what do you think? I don't know. I guess I got to chew on it a little bit. It's been 24 hours since we've chewed on it, and boy, oh boy, I mean, I think this movie might end up becoming a cult classic, if nothing else.
Oh yeah, I could see that.
You know, if nothing else, this movie will be the movie that people say, you got to see this fucking film.
It has cult classic written all over.
It has cult classic. And like we've talked about this before, right? We've said that what makes a cult classic is the hubris of the filmmaker. And this is the hubris of Francis Ford Coppola. So you can only imagine the level of cult classic this movie might end up being.
Well, Brian, to kind of wrap things up, I want to get like deeply philosophical on you.
Okay.
Because I know I brought this up to you off air, and I want to bring it up again. And for our listeners there, my favorite Tom Petty song is called "The Last DJ." And the key lines of the song is, there goes the last DJ who played what he wants to play, who said what he wants to say. There goes your freedom of choice. There goes the last human voice. I suggest listening to the song. It's a catchy tune on top of being kind of a topical thing of I guess what Tom Petty was suggesting is the dying independent voice in radio, and everything had become commercialized and taken over. I'm afraid, and I could be considered hyperbolic here and overly pretentiously nihilistic in my presentation of this question, but is the idea of one of the great filmmakers of the revolutionary era, the second golden era in American film of the 1970s, putting all of his money up to make the exact film he wanted, exactly how he wanted, without interference, and presenting it to the world in a world where whenever there's a new independent voice in film, they are immediately signed up by Marvel and lose their voice. But also in an era where we are losing people going to the cinema, we are losing people who want independent cinema. If they want movies at all, they want popular IP, comic book, sequel, what have you. But on top of that, the idea of movies alone are kind of dripping through to people being more interested in TikTok and Discord and those I'm forgetting the terms for the Let's Play video game websites and things of that nature. Is Coppola the last DJ, or am I maybe being a bit hyperbolic?
I mean, I think there is some very serious truth to what you're saying. I really do. I have seen that change even amongst my kids, to be perfectly honest with you. If I've tried watching movies with them that are older, they immediately say this is too slow. Like that is a result of social media. That is a result of TikTok, Instagram, YouTube. It is trained. Twitch. It's trained our consumption of media to be measured in nanoseconds, so that there is not the time devoted to plot, to story, to character, to arcs. All of that is now boiled down to content. What is the content going to be? And I think there's truth to it. I'm not going to be like Martin Scorsese and say like, well, superhero movies are bad. I will never say that. Batman is one of my absolute favorite ones. And I think to lump all movies and say that these are bad and these are good, that's not realistic. I do think that audience tastes have changed so much as a result of our media diet that the type of movie that is original, that takes its time, that has an arc, that has characters, that those sorts of things do not lend themselves to the diet of the audience that we have currently. That is what I think. Whether that means that film will die, I don't know. Because there also is this thing, and I mean, we've studied this in film school, John, right? Like there was a time period when the popular epic was the thing everyone went to go see, right? Every studio had to make a gigantic epic. You had like, the fuck was it?
Ben-Hur, Cleopatra.
But yeah. Either they were epics or they were musicals, right? And that was the only thing that was being produced for like 20 fucking years. And then what happened? Audience taste started to change. So do I think that we are going to be forever on this track of our content being measured in nanoseconds? I don't know. I don't think so. I think we're in a period where that's the case. And I think we're in a period where our content is IP, remake, sequel, soft sequel boot, legacy sequel, and that's all we're going to get. Eventually, that is going to stop. And we've seen it already with Marvel, right? We've seen that start. And if you might have a Wolverine and Deadpool, and that's it, but it's not going to cure what we're starting to see, which is the exhaustion of the superhero movie. We're starting to see that. And I hope that the independent filmmaker doesn't stop, that the independent filmmaker has platforms that they can use. I think we got to be smarter. Personally, between you and me and the audience here, I think it's up to us as the independent filmmaker to be smarter than our audience and maybe make our films marketed in a way and presented in a way that fits what they're used to. So maybe it is we make short form videos that then cause them to watch more of them, with each one of those short form videos giving a plot point or a character or a piece of the arc. Why? Because that is what they consume. That's what they're used to. So maybe it is that we do that, but I don't think it's going to be that we're not going to make movies anymore. I think it's just going to be we're going to have to change. And change is scary, as this movie teaches us.
Yeah. Well, I just hope that the John Waters, George Romero, and Roger Cormans of the world can still exist today.
I think they will. I think there will always be an audience for it. I just think that the mass appeal of those types of movies and those types of stories, it's not going to work nowadays. But I don't think that's going to last forever. I really don't. I think we're in a period where this is what the audience wants. And I mean, think about it, John. It's because of escapism. That's really what it is, right? It's your current reality is shit. So let me go watch this goofy fucking, sequel to a movie that came out 30 something years ago. Sorry, Beetlejuice. I love you, but go watch, listen to back catalog. But let's be honest here. Reason why people love that movie is because it gives them nostalgia vibes, and it gets their focus off of their bills, their credit cards, their lack of food, their lack of healthcare, their lack of shit. So that's what it is. It's escapism. And there's nothing wrong with that. We've had that throughout history. The reason why the Universal monster movies became so popular is because why? The Great Depression and World War II. Okay? So this is a continuing cycle. I'm seeing that we are in a time period now where this is the type of media we want. I don't see that being forever. I really don't.
Yeah, and it comes down to the ease of escapism. It used to be where it was either read books or go see a movie, or, oh, now you got a radio. But you can't see it, so you still want to go to the theater. And then TV came out, but most of early TV was just, shite. And so you want to go to the theater. Now it's harder to get people to go to the theater because now we have Wi-Fi and streaming services, and hey, even if you still want cable, grandpa, you can get Hulu, and you can still watch so much material that is so highly well made. It's harder to find reasons to get people to to the cinema. I see it as my church. As a person who has no religion, I see the movie complex as me as going to church, but not everybody sees it that way. A lot of people don't like the theater, so I'll be.
I love the theater. I see it in the same way as you do. I mean, we've talked a bunch about going to the Erie Horror Fest, and we're going to go back there. But going to the Warner Theater is like going to church. I love going to that theater. It is such a beautiful theater, and it is striking. And I mean, you could put whatever fucking bullshit on that screen, and I still would have a good time. But I think
from Idiocracy.
Sure, why not?
Butt farting.
Yeah, why not? But I think there is something to the idea of how do you make the movie going experience compete with that. We've had on people on this podcast, people like Anastasia Elfman, who've independent filmmaker, along with her husband Richard, who they bring a live show to each screening of Forbidden Zone and Bloody Bridget. So they make it interactive. Even with this film, we went to it and there was a moment, which was really interesting, where there was an interactive element to it, where someone talked into a microphone, talked to the screen, and Adam Driver in the film responds to it. Now, you might say well, that's kind of a chintzy gimmick, but I look at it as you can't get that on your couch.
Yeah.
That is something. And I think that is probably where I see the movie going experience really being successful is it's a movie plus interaction and plus an additional type of entertainment. That's the cure right there. AMC executives, if you're listening to me, that is what I'm saying.
Or Cinemark ones for me.
Or Cinemark. Yeah. Yeah. There you go. Well, I did not anticipate that this episode would go an hour and a half long, but it has.
I did.
You did.
Yeah.
And we didn't even get into all of the bits. There is so much more. Yeah.
No, if we broke this down scene by scene, we would have been here for a Ken Burns documentary. This would have been a 6-hour episode.
Yeah,
so.
we would all have longer beards by the time we're done. With that said, John, where can they find you at on the internet?
I don't even know who I am anymore. No, that's true. I never knew who I was. You can find me at Facebook, Instagram. Again, I still am technically on Twitter. I won't call it the other thing. But I don't do anything with it. I think I uninstalled it from my phone. But you can find me over at JDev's Video Nasties. I am looking to put up here in the very near future to do a So Many Questions, both Ghostbusters 1 and 2 in one episode. So,
oh, that's going to be a fun one. Already can tell it's going to be a fun one. And there's a lot of questions associated with both Ghostbusters 1 and 2.
Yeah.
Well, as for myself, if you've loved this episode, and you want to help us out, do me a favor and just share this episode with your friends, with your family. Just, you're listening to this episode right now on your phone, maybe. Just go and just text it to a buddy, and just say hey, I know you're not going to go see Megalopolis, but here, listen to these guys talk about it. Outside of that, if you go to cinemapsychoshow.com/follow, you can follow us. That's right there in the bottom. Right there, you can follow us on all your favorite podcast platforms. We got them all there. We got Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeart. They're all there. You can click a button and boom, you're listening to us. And if you're watching us on YouTube, hey, thanks for doing that. I appreciate it. Right there at the bottom, do me a favor. Hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, and hit the bell. Why? Because YouTube really doesn't want to push our videos unless people do that sort of shit. I kid you not. It's the fucking algorithm. So if you help me out, it'll do me a solid. That'll be great for the podcast. It'll reach more people. And also throw in a comment too. If you saw Megalopolis, if you liked it or you hated it, or maybe you disagree with what John and I talked about, throw it in the comments. We'll respond to you. I'm actually pretty quick on responding to comments in the YouTube there. But with that said, we will see you next time.
John Voight shot Shia LaBeouf in the butthole with a golden arrow.